stuff to set up your company, you could do it for yourself. I remembered one topic that I wanted to talk about. All right. So there's been a lot of conversation online about whether or not it's legal to buy an MC number. So yes and no. Well, one is perfectly legal. A lot of people get on and they're know-it-alls and they say, well, yeah, when you buy an MC number, it resets. It's pointless to buy, and that which is true if you only try to buy. If you transfer an MC number now, it used to be you could transfer it and it was fine. There would be no delay as long as insurance was current. When you buy the new policy, it just goes into effect the same day, and then you cancel your old policy after the new policy has been in place. It doesn't necessarily work that way anymore because now it does. It resets and it begins as a new authority. If you're just transferring the authority, if you're buying the existing company completely, and the insurance is active and the company's good and it's got a good safer and all that stuff, then that authority is good. And this goes for a carrier authority, and I'll explain why in a second. But if you buy a carrier authority, you buy a motor carrier. So you got to stop saying the carrier authority and just say, listen, buy the motor carrier, because that motor carrier is the one that owns the authority essentially. So this is what ends up happening. If it's a corporation, LLC, or anything, the EIN number doesn't need to change right away. It will eventually, because it'll be called a merger and you'll have to merge. I am not a lawyer, by the way. I should put a little disclaimer up there saying I'm not a lawyer. This is just from the research. Plus, I've transferred a couple of MC numbers myself to me and from me, as you know, once the company's built up, and that was what the deal was. But my question was with the way insurance works now, because basically when I took over a company, I just became like a co-owner. The original owner was still the majority owner of the deal, and that was, based on my contract, because I would come in and revamp a company and make it do well again, and then exit and make some money. But now if you're buying a complete company, I confirmed with a friend of mine that does insurance. The insurance, because there's a new risk attached, because the owner is the one who essentially guarantees, even though the owner is binding a policy between a corporation, the company they own, and the insurance company, the risk associated with the payables is to the owner of that company. So when a new owner comes in, a new insurance policy has to be purchased. The old insurance doesn't carry over unless the old owner stays majority owner in the company. Does that make sense? I think it does. So what would end up happening, but you can do it as a seamless transition, because you can first say, okay, here's my letter of intent. You buy the company, you are listed on without removing the old carrier. And then you go and bind a new insurance policy. So you still have to pay all that cash for it. It could potentially be cheaper depending on the company's safety, but and the new owner's personal credit. The new owner has awesome credit. And they have no freight claims for previous ones. The company they're purchasing has no loss runs, and perfect safer and really good track record. The insurance could technically go down, because you could do like a midterm renewal essentially for the new company owner. But you do need a new insurance policy. That was the one question in the group yesterday I didn't know the answer to, so I wanted to find out before I just said it. So to answer the question, yes, you can 100% buy an existing carrier authority as long as you're buying the company. You should buy the company, because if you're not and you're just transferring the authority, everything resets. To the eyes of new brokers, to the eyes of brokers, to the eyes of FMCSA, you are a new entity and you got to go through all the same hoops and everything that a brand new trucking company does. So you would say then at that point, what is the benefit of buying a existing company? You don't have to wait a long time to get started. If I went to Joe Blow's Trucking and said, hey, listen, man, I'll give you $20,000 for your company, all your assets and all that stuff, I'll buy your company right now. You literally take over that company that day, or as soon as the paperwork's done, you buy the new insurance policy. That's put in place and filed with FMCSA before the old one is canceled, and then you're good to go. And you have an authority that's just continuously running. The only thing that changes is insurance. So you're going to get the renewals from brokers, but that's simple. It's a lot easier than a lot of people think. And I knew it was easy, but I didn't want to give out too much information yesterday in the group, because I wasn't sure about the insurance side. Now, with that said, hold on, I got to get a drink of water from my gallon. This is the second gallon, so I'm a gallon and a half down for the day. Anyway, And the people that watch my videos every day understand why I say that, because I have to do a water cut and it sucks. Anyway, here's a couple of things to think about if you are purchasing a motor carrier authority, a carrier, not a broker. We'll talk about brokers in a minute. But if you're purchasing a motor carrier company and you want to go in, you really have to do a deep dive, like with forensic accountants and through their entire financial network. Make sure they don't have UCCs. That's another thing. If you're buying a company that's factoring, the factoring company has a UCC on the company and as the owner, on the owner as well. The owner always, when you're factoring invoices, the owner always has a UCC on them. If you own assets or you have taken out loans, or the company took out loans or something like that, there very well could be a UCC on the company. And so you have to really do your due diligence and verify everything that's out there, and make sure that there's nothing that's going to come back to bite you in the long run, because otherwise it's just a losing proposition. And why would you buy a company if it has a shit ton of debt, unless you're trying to do it for a customer base or whatever. But that's one thing. You got to look at insurance rate, the driver files. Basically, as soon as you take over the company, it's all on you. So if the driver files and everything, the carrier compliance stuff and all your compliance documents and invoicing and accounting, and if everything isn't in order, the second you take over, that could be your downfall right from the start. So there's a lot of good about buying a company, but there's also a lot of bad about buying a company, and you have to do your due diligence to make sure. Robert said 20 G's, that's all. I was using that for a hypothetical. I've actually bought companies for nothing. And the reason is because they were going to close anyway. And I said, listen, I'll take your company. We'll turn a profit out of it. And then I exit and you pay me to leave. Otherwise I take over the company. And I've done that a couple of times, and I've both been successful and not. I've learned from the past, I will never, ever take over another company unless I have 100% control of it. Because if the person that I take it over from has any control at all, they're just gonna keep doing all the same negative shit that made the company go bad in the first place. So that's one thing I learned. But you could buy a company for nothing. Yeah, if a company has because you don't need to buy the trucks and trailers and all that stuff. In all reality, you don't. The only thing you would need to do is buy the company, make sure there's no debt, make sure there's no liability, put another vehicle on the new insurance policy that you bind, and then the other vehicles can be removed when you remove the policy. And it's very simple. There's probably a little bit more to it for the insurance side. I don't know all of it. All I know is that it's possible. That's what I asked a friend of mine yesterday to find out. But yeah, companies to purchase a company, it's really not that expensive, unless the company has a lot coming in. Because the company is only worth what it's producing. So if the company is producing $100 grand a year and it's running super lean and it's not going to be a profit. Nate said, doesn't the FMCSA require you to get a new MC when ownership changes? No, they do not. So that's simple, because the ownership doesn't change. If you transfer an MC, the ownership changes. If you purchase a company, the ownership isn't changing of the MC number, because the company is one that's listed. I personally have gone in, and this is why I was surprised when she said, that there's an insurance issue, because I've personally gone in and amended the MC numbers of through the MCS 150 to update it to a new EIN, because that was a major argument, is that you need a new EIN when you take over a corporation, but that's not true. You only need a new EIN if it meets certain bullet points, essentially. But yeah, you don't, the authority doesn't get, the authority's not being reassigned. The company is. The authority stays the same. If you change the name and all that, then yeah, it's other flags. But if you're buying Joe Blow's Trucking and your name is Joanne Blow or whatever, then you're good. If it's got like Mike's Trucking and your name is Sven, then you may have to, transfer the company, get it going, and then you have to file it for a new charter with the state or a DBA or something like that. When you register a new company to buy an existing MC number, then yeah, that's where everything starts over. Hopefully that answers your question there, bud. And I verified that yesterday just to make sure that I wasn't giving misinformation. I know personally I've done it, and maybe I was just doing it through a loophole and didn't realize it, because you can easily just go into an MCS 150 and update the address, update everything, the EIN number and everything, and then boom. As far as the government's concerned, everything's done. The only thing that has to be changed is a new insurance policy is purchased. And it just reflects the new owner as the risk. The company, the person who owns the policy is not the owner of the company, it's the company itself. So the company is the one that has the insurance policy, but because the owner is the one who guarantees it, it can go. And that's why I was asking her yesterday. I'm like, does the insurance rate go up or does it go down? She's like, well, if the authority is active, this is the key. If the authority is active, then buy it. If it hasn't been, if it's not active, or they're pending cancellation for non-payment or something like that, no, don't do it, because you're going to have a hard ass time getting a new insurance for it, because they all see that. But if the carrier is active and they're running and everything's good and their safer is good and they have active insurance and a good pay history, and you come in as a new owner and you've got great credit and all that stuff, you can easily buy the company with very little downtime, if any, and be running. Now, this guy said, I don't know how you say your name. I said he bought a broker MC. A broker MC is a little bit different. I personally would never buy a broker MC. I would just buy the book of business if I was ever going to do it, because there's so much liability affiliated with a broker MC. Plus, you'll need a new bond no matter what you do. The bond's not going to carry over because the bond is personally under that person. If you're factoring and all that stuff, you have to check for UCCs again, because the UCCs are going to be on the owner and on the company itself and sister companies and all that. I remember when I had a UCC for a motor carrier that I owned several years ago, they filed a UCC on the company that my company. They filed it on me, my wife, my company, and then they did it on the parent company, which should be expected because I owned a corporation that had a bunch of companies. But then they also filed UCCs on every single other company that had nothing to do with logistics, just because I was the owner of it. And I had to fight with them to get them removed, because some of them, we needed equity, because a UCC could screw up your chances for loans and all sorts of stuff. Because a lot of them want to be first in line for payables, and that UCC, whoever files it first is first. And that means that they're the first ones to get their money should something happen, and that's how they guarantee it. But I always get a kick out of it when factoring companies say they don't file UCCs, because that's the biggest load of garbage you've ever heard in your life, because they all do it. But yeah, like I was saying, I wouldn't buy broker MC for the life of me. I would just buy the book of business and just merge the brokerage into one of my companies or something, if that was really something I was interested in. I don't see the value. I think there's too much risk, unless it's a really old company, and then you do it the same way. You just take it over the same way, and you would have to buy a new bond. But the authority stays the same. Everything stays the same, because the company isn't it's not merging into another company, or it's not you're not closing it and starting a new company, and it's not a new company name that's just purchasing the MC. There's no benefit to it. And any banks or anything like that are all going to flag that anyway, in terms of like making you factorable. If it has authority has one number and then it goes to someone else, because I purchased an authority a couple of years ago for the same reason. This was before MAP 21 and all that, so it was a lot easier to do. And it wasn't, well, it was easier to do, but it was a pain in the ass, because when I would call on loads or something like that, and the broker already had them set up previously, they had all the wrong information. I had to update everything all the time, or they burnt a couple of brokers on loads or canceled them, so they had a couple of reports, and I had to deal with those and be like, listen, I just took over the company. It's not, none of those guys are even here anymore. But the reason I did that is because I was able to walk in, essentially write a check for a couple of grand, and say, and walk out with a company and be running and active, so it's a lot quicker. You could become a trucking company faster, and that's why people are always posting it. And then you get all the people afterwards that are like, you can't buy an MC, save your money, you're stupid, this and that. I just get a kick out of it. I really wish people would stop saying stuff. It's like the whole CDL debacle with hot shots. If you're under 26,000, you don't need a CDL. And then there's people that are like, no, if the trailer's over 10, you do. Which it's people saying stuff that they think they know, but they don't. And it's just misinformation. And I believe there's a lot of misinformation in the freight business, which sucks, because it's a good business. And if everyone was to help each other, it would be a really great